Hello, can everybody hear me, I hope? I didn't wear a suit and pockets and all this stuff for this microphone, so. I was just going to tell you a little bit about adult protection. I supervise the unit. I've been there for 12 years in Jefferson County Adult Protection Unit. And we have 10 caseworkers for all of Jefferson County. And so as you can see, why the priority is for you to call law enforcement, because they have multiple jurisdictions with many, many more officers to respond immediately, whereas we have our 10 caseworkers and a pretty large caseload to be able to respond. So every county has an adult protection unit that varies in size. Denver County is quite large, but then you might have a smaller county that only has one caseworker, and they might do child protection half the time. And then we're all under the umbrella of the state and overseen by the state, and state does monitoring and training and regulation and stuff like that. So I was going to mention too, and it's something that I don't think has been mentioned yet, is that self-neglect is probably our biggest caseload that we have in adult protection, and those reports can come directly to the adult protection unit. So you can call our hotline and we will basically ask you all the same questions. We actually have quite a comprehensive and long intake process where we ask a lot of questions about people's abilities, ADLs, what they can do, providers. It's very extensive, might take about anywhere between 15 minutes to a half an hour to go through one intake. But we base our next actions on that information that we get. So the more information we get, and I think that's reiterated from what law enforcement wants, is that the more information we get, the better response we can have. So our process is that when we receive a report, whether it's from law enforcement or somebody else, we then put it into our system. We check to see if we've had any priors on the victim or the perpetrator, and then we do a team assessment of the allegations, the victim, what the situation is, and what our next response is. When you call law enforcement, they will usually dispatch somebody immediately to the location. In adult protection, we're a little slower response, unless if it's an emergency, you should be calling law enforcement anyway. But even if it's a self-neglect situation, we'll be telling you to call law enforcement if it's immediate. As I said, since we're a smaller unit, we have a slower response, and people are trying to juggle when they can get out there. But usually it's within 3 working days is our mandate. So on the reporting piece of it, a lot of people do call APS because they're intimidated to call and make that report directly to the police. So the other piece of it is that our reports and our reporting parties are confidential, and we don't disclose their names, so a lot of people don't want to disclose that, and so they'll call us. We will be directing you to call law enforcement, especially if you're a mandated reporter. You need to make the report to them to cover yourself. A lot of times if it's groups in a group home or an employee, even like we get a lot of bank employees, they'll talk to their supervisor and make the call together. But as long as that person who has the direct information is calling, that's who we want to talk to, or law enforcement wants to talk to. So when we direct, people call us first, we direct to the law enforcement. We then have become a mandated reporter ourselves. So we'll usually get some information, ask that person with the direct information to call law enforcement, and then we give it a little bit, and then we call law enforcement to make sure that report was made. Because if it wasn't, then we're going to be making the report with the knowledge that we have, the information that we have, to be able to make sure that it's covered. So you're not the investigators. Mandatory reporters, a lot of times you might have somebody with a bruise, but you don't know how it happened. You know, it has to be an intentional physical abuse, but even if you don't know, it's better to call, and then we'll figure it out. Police will figure it out, they'll start the investigation. When they'll either call us at the time and run it by us about the situation that they have, or if it's not immediate, they might just fax us that report, and then we do our own assessment. And that might be some more follow-up calls. You as a reporter might get a secondary call from APS because we want some different kind of information, or that police report left us with some questions that we still want answered. So you might be getting an additional call. So I guess the story here is we're okay if you call and you're not sure. Just run it by us. So this is kind of the same process that we've talked about a little bit. I thought I'd address more the APS may investigate the report and offer the client protective services and resources. Like I said, we go through a process that doesn't mean every report we get, we send somebody out on. We do a team approach where we decide, is this person really an at-risk adult? In adult protection, even if you have IDD, even if it's diagnosed IDD, or you fall under that at-risk elder population, we do more of an assessment about whether you're able to advocate for yourself, what your mental capacity is, what your resources are, your abilities to fend for yourself. Just because, say, somebody's over 70, you know, that doesn't make you necessarily an at-risk adult in the adult protection world. Same thing with IDD. It doesn't, if somebody's on the autism spectrum, they may have a car, drive, have a job, have a lot of resources, be able to advocate for themselves. So we wouldn't necessarily intervene. Some of the differences between law enforcement and APS is that, I'll give an example. So when police go in and maybe that caregiver has abused the person and the caregiver gets arrested, what happens to the person that's home alone? And so that's kind of where we come in. Who's going to take care of them now? What are their resources? What can we do on an immediate basis to help them? We offer a lot of resources. We coordinate with community center boards, the regional center. We're in our building right next to our home-based and community care services, and we walk across the aisle and do a lot of setting up services, getting people on Medicaid, things like that, so that they have the services at home. So after an APS report is made, we review the report and decide on a response. If it's an immediate response, we'll send somebody out right away, but most of ours are in that 3-day range. I think this part confused some people. When meeting the criteria for mandatory reporting, the report will be shared with law enforcement. I think that's that piece that if we have the information and it isn't, and the mandatory reporter doesn't get it to police, we will do that. The other piece of it is that often law enforcement is asking for our investigation. They're asking for our reports. What did we do? What did we find out later? And so we can share that information with them and the district attorney back and forth. We may take action which includes investigation, and we do joint investigations. We set up a lot of case management services. All of our victims are 18 and over. Victims, clients, everybody has a different word, consumers. So they have rights, which is often frustrating for people that are mandatory reporters. If somebody's living in a hoarder house, if they, don't want to take their medications, if they're abusing drugs or alcohol. Those are things that, unless they don't have capacity, they have a right to do it. It's that cognitive capacity piece that's kind of tricky, and we can always investigate, but what we can make a person do really hinges on their capacity. So maybe a parent feels like they want their son or daughter to live in an assisted living, and that son or daughter wants to live with their friend who's a drug user. As long as that son or daughter has capacity to make that decision, they're an adult, they can make the decision. Jefferson County Adult Protection is currently guardian to approximately 60 adults. So amongst our investigation piece that we're doing, my 10 caseworkers are guardians for those 60 people who we see on a monthly basis and make all their decisions for. Another piece that's often a question is medical decision making. And adult protection, Jefferson County cannot file for guardianship just to make medical decisions. So when a hospital calls us that they have somebody there and they don't have a legal guardian and they're not sure about the person's capacity, the hospital is responsible for running that through their ethics committee and or doing whatever is necessary for medical treatment. So in adult protection, our priorities are these: confidentiality. Like I said, even our reporting parties are kept confidential. We're very careful about any information we share or release, which is often frustrating for parents, caregivers, other people calling because they want to know what happened or what's going on or why can't we do something. At-risk adults must consent to protective services, and we do not need consent to investigate, but they have a right to tell us to go away. And after we can kind of make some judgments about that they have capacity to tell us to go away, we'll go away. But for every law, everything that's written in rule and stuff, there's always some exceptions. We're dealing with people. Nothing is black and white. There's a lot of gray in this area that we do every day. But we're always willing to talk to people about the situation. So if you want to just call our hotline and talk to us, we're happy to do that. Self-determination, we always do, try to ask people what they want, where do they want to live, and least restrictive. So we always try to get in and out for the shortest period of time, and mostly we try to talk to the person who's our victim and see what they want, what's the next steps, and try to have input from them. So I think that was it.